Hi guys, this is my first video presentation for the semester, and the reading I'll be covering this evening is Barry Buzan's The National Security Problem in International Relations. To start off, Barry Buzan mentions that national security ranks high on prioritization for most people. Also, that national security dictates the conditions that determine major security factors such as economics and military. Uh, Buzan also mentions throughout human history that states have been made to feel insecure by the existence of other competing states, and that national security impacts not only military but also economic policies, which can vary dramatically. Uh, Next, Buzan then begins to elaborate further and states that in order to understand national security, there must be a foundation in the understanding of security concepts. Buzan states that simple-minded understandings of security concepts can create barriers that inhibit progress that may lead to problems. Furthermore, Buzan states that simple-minded meanings can be contradictory to concepts involved in the logic explaining national security. Buzan then states that uh, security is not the only method in which national security can be derived. That also power, which originates from the realist approach to international relations, is also another method. This was the approach that was championed, according to Buzan, by writers such as E.H. Carr and Hans Morgenthau. Buzan then mentions that it is widely argued that the method of power in international relations reveals basic patterns of capabilities in the international system. Power also reveals that the motives of the actors involved. So, uh, the idealists tend to favor peaceful goals, which is loosely associated with the idealist school, Buzan, as stated by Buzan. These two approaches to national security, security and power, were the dominant methods of thought regarding national security in the 1980s, and these methods played a vital role towards the end of the Cold War era. Now, Buzan further elaborates by stating that in the 1980s there was still heavy emphasis placed on the military aspect of national security. And then going back towards the 1950s, John Hertz introduced the theory of the security dilemma. Now, the security dilemma theorized that nations that attempted to improve their standing internationally as far as national security concerns would be viewed as a threat by other nations due to their own insecurity based on their own defensive measures. The Cold War era proved to be unaffected by the theory of John Hertz's security dilemma theory. Uh, and then Buzan mentions that, supported by author Leonard Beaton as well as others, it is argued the need to expand concepts of national security beyond the limits of parochial national security concepts. Um, he also states that Hoffman also echoes this point, as mentioned by Buzan, for the need to begin turning national security into a philosophy more towards a new world order. And lastly, Buzan states that Hidley Bull argued against the excessive self-interest when pertaining to national security concepts. Uh, Buzan then states that to further support the expansionism of national security concepts, the Brandt Commission called for the establishment of new concepts which went beyond military or defense theory and looked to look more towards a logic of broader interdependence amongst nations. Buzan later explained that the persistent underdeveloped thinking regarding national security disputed at the empirical level came from a lack of any deeper understanding of national security concepts, which can be explained in five different ways. First, that the ideas were too complex to attract any critical analysis, and because of this, uh, the ideas were neglected in favor of more palatable or more easily explained concepts. Secondly, the concept that national security is neglected because of the overlap of power and acute confrontation. Thirdly, there were revolts against realist theories towards the end of the 1970s, and many believe that there are too many self-fulfilling models that lean towards nuclear proliferation. The inclination at this time was to push the militaristic realist model to the background in favor of concepts that promoted more of an international political economy. Uh, the fourth reason is that the underdevelopment of strategic studies was because of the large volume of empirical literature that was dedicated to problems geared towards military policy and the lack of development of security's conceptual aspects. And the fifth and last, uh, the enduring cause that Buzan mentioned is that the neglect of security is due to the fact that practitioners of national security policy have compelling reasons to maintain ambiguity of its practices, and that the appeal regarding national security policies would require that they would otherwise have to be explained to the public. Um, Lastly, Buzan explains that in seeking security, that the state and society are sometimes in harmony with one another, and sometimes they are opposed to one another, and that the underlying reasoning behind security is survival, but that national security includes a substantial range of concerns. So that concludes my first video um, for this semester regarding Barry Buzan and national security. Thank you for listening.